right, everybody, welcome back to the Friday Night Prepper Pre-Party Show. I have a very, very interesting live stream for you tonight. Once again, we're going to talk about something that the mainstream media probably is never going to tell you about. And I have with me a special guest that I'm going to bring on here in just a minute. I want to give people just a chance to get the notifications out. So our few people in chat earlier, Scott Hummer and Tuck, thank you so much for joining. Appreciate you guys. Hope you guys are having a good Friday night. And if you're joining in for first time, don't forget to check in the description for some links for some different products that I think you'll like, maybe some discount codes in there, things like that. And we only have a few rules here. Number one, be kind to the moderators. Number two, be kind to the guests. Number three, don't be a racist or sexist jerk. If you are, our mods have full permission to put you in timeout or boot you out of the stream. So other than that, we'll have a good time. We got some good information to share tonight. And Utah Mike, Utah Steven, thanks for joining us. We're going to go ahead and bring on our guest here. All right. And Wayne, I think you're muted right now. You might have to hit your button over there. There we go. So my guest tonight is returning to you. You were here with us when we did the aliens live stream, right?
Yeah.
Panel? Okay. Yeah. Welcome back. Welcome back. How you doing?
I'm doing all right. How about you?
Doing good. Appreciate you helping me out tonight. I asked my community for somebody with a little bit of expertise on what we're going to talk about tonight, and Wayne was kind enough to volunteer. And he actually didn't need to do this, but he sent me his credentials just so I could see that he was legit. So you are aviation warfare specialist, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Can you tell them a little bit about your background, what you're willing to share?
Yeah. So I joined the Navy in 2005, and I joined as an airframe mechanic. I went through boot camp, did dive motivator, because originally I was going to volunteer for EOD. Got through dive motivator, finished the program, and are like, well, there's no more billets for EOD. So I went back to the fleet as an airframer, which is something your recruiter will lie to you about. They'll tell you can join and go special forces right out of boot camp, so you can go EOD, SWIC, or SEALs. But if you don't pick a rate before you do that, you'll go back to the fleet and be chipping paint on a boat or something for the next 4 years.
Gotcha.
So luckily I was smart enough to pick a rate. My first command was with HM14 from 2005 to 2009. We were a mine countermeasure squadron, but we never did any mine countermeasures missions. We have a heavy lift dual point capability, and also we can carry things and that other helos aren't capable of. So we were on call 72, kind of anywhere in the world in 72 hours, doing real world stuff, doing anything from disaster relief, presidential escorts, because they don't take all the MX-1 aircraft when they leave the country. They take one MX-1 aircraft for the cameras, and the rest is all supported by the 53s from HM14. We also work with Marine Recon, a few other groups, and also did disaster relief on top of that. So it was a very busy command, never home more than a week at a time, just constantly always gone for the time I was there. Moved on from that. In 2009, I went to VAQ 129 out in Whidbey Island. At that time, they still had Growlers, and they had 2 converted F-18s. They were crossing over from the Growler to the Prowler platform for electronic attack. Mm-hmm. And I had to learn both aircraft and then train the fleet coming through on the new F-18 Growler. And from the time I was there, we trained every squadron except for one in the entire fleet. Wow. And we also had Canadian, British, and Australian aircrew there as well. And all of us were helo guys or Prowler guys. So we had to all learn the new aircraft and then immediately turn around, start teaching it to others, start training the new troubleshooters and new pilots on launch procedures. And from there, I went to VAQ 140 around 2013. They were going through the VAQ 129 program, getting the new aircraft, and I jumped on there, helped them stand up. It was I was one of 2 people in the command that were all systems because nobody had any qualifications. So we stood the command up, got all the shops set up, the collateral duty programs, went out to deployments in Syria, North Africa, Iraq, all over the Med and the Middle East, and developed new tactics in the field. came back, and from 17 to 19, I went back to 129 for shore duty.
Wow.
And
appreciate what you've done, man. And it's an honor to have you on here. You know, I've got a special place in my heart for all of our veterans, and I can't say enough. Thank you.
That's no problem, Sarge. To me, it was more of a job than anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Before we get into what we're going to talk about here, Wayne's got a channel. I've got it scrolling along the bottom there, and I've got a link for that in the description. Make sure you check out his channel. And we were talking backstage. You've got some stuff coming up on like basic firearm stuff for like beginners, right?
Yeah.
And comms too.
Yeah, I've got a small series on the 3 types of comms every survivalist, prepper, prepared citizen should. The most practical, affordable, and kind of covers all your bases, easiest to use and everything too.
Awesome. Well, you guys make sure you check that out. I know some of you are already subscribed to him. If you're not, I highly recommend it. And Wayne's been a good friend to our channel here for a while, so I'm glad to have you back here. So thank you, everybody in chat. I see everybody popping in now. Notifications must have went out, which is a good thing. You just never know with YouTube. Let me show you guys what we're talking about here. So I'm going to show you a clip from the Sean Ryan show. Now, I really thought YouTube was going to take this whole thing down, and because it's been a week now and they haven't, I feel okay to show this. And and Sean Ryan's show is pretty good about like not copy striking people and stuff like that. They actually encourage people to share out the information, but I am still going to break it up like every 10 to 15 seconds and so just to for fair use for use act, to not make it like that we're stealing content here. We're in fact trying to share content, and I really recommend you all check this out. So bear with me here. I'm going to share a screen. All right, I think I queued this up. All right, so we're gonna break this up like 10 seconds at a time here or so.
You offline, I cannot say this on the air, but we had 2 solid sources, one south of the border and then one from an element within our own government that confirmed independently of each other that some Iranian-made ManPads, so surface-to-air missiles, had come across the border.
All right, so you would think that our media would be picking this up and rolling with it, right? They're not. They're in fact, I've been searching all week long for stories about this, and I really only found a couple. May or may not get to sharing those later on here. And I you know, for a minute here, I even questioned for myself, like, is this guy just, you know, blowing smoke or whatever? And then a couple days ago, a story came out that an RPG was actually seized at the border not too long ago. So what he's talking about is slightly different than an RPG. When I'm going to pull Wayne into that discussion here in a second, but that is, in my mind, confirmation that somebody is trying to smuggle heavy weapons across the U.S. border. All right, let me go. We're going to give it another 10 seconds here or so.
We had the location and everything else. Well, Doc, that's what he goes by, Doc Chambers. He put this out on a podcast, and I was very emphatic. Like, this is not stuff that I like to put on social media. I'm an intel guy by trade. This stuff is not for social media consumption. We got this to Secret Service. We did the whole gamut and got everything pushed to them, and that's why Trump was pushing a lot of this stuff out when he was, because we had told the Secret Service.
All right, I got to pause it there. So obviously, both Sean and Sam reported this to the FBI, and I encourage you to watch that whole podcast, if you haven't already, and subscribe to both of those guys, especially Sean Ryan. I really love what Sean Ryan does, and he covers topics that you're just never going to hear about in the mainstream media. But they did the right thing. They got in everything that they've talked about in this podcast. They got the information to FBI, and later on this week, after that podcast went live, the letters that he's talking about, this is a little bit unrelated, from the Cybertruck bomber, were confirmed to be authentic. So at least that part of his story is verifiable. All right, where did I leave off? Here we go.
And they had the reporting and everything else. But we have not, to my knowledge, have not recovered those ManPads. Now, I'm not privy to that, but what I do know we have done is we have apprehended the couriers on a second run of theirs. And we have local law enforcement got together with federal law enforcement and rolled up the safe house in, I will not say that on this show, but they rolled up the safe house where it was. And we have since identified what that issue was on the border.
All right. That's probably enough for that. You guys can watch the rest of it later on. Let me end that share, and then we're going to head on back to you guys. All right. So what are we talking about here? When for people who, like me, are not military, what is a ManPad?
A ManPad is, to sum it up, it's a man-portable surface-to-air missile system. Basically, think of an RPG or a Stinger missile system like you see in the movies that can target and knock down aircraft out of the sky.
So this is shoulder-fired, right?
Yeah, shoulder-fired weapon. The Iranian ones that are known are the Mythic 1, the Mythic 2, which are based off the Chinese QW1 and QW2 systems. The Mythic 1 travels about Mach 2.6. It's got a ceiling of about 2 miles, and I believe has a, let me double check, 3-mile range. So they have to be close. So if they want to take out an airline or a fixed-wing aircraft, they got to be pretty close to the airport and takeoff and landing because they only have 2-mile ceiling. And it also puts helicopters in danger pretty much just about anywhere where they're flying low.
So I'm thinking about, like, I live here in Charleston, and I live close to both an Air Force base and an international airport. Okay. And we see planes flying very, very low all the time from all over the city, right? Like, so this gives you a pretty wide geographic area. You wouldn't necessarily, in my mind, and how, like, at least how my city's structured, you wouldn't have to be like sitting in the airport parking lot to pull this off. You could probably be outside of that range a little bit.
No, absolutely not. As long as you got a clear shot off an elevated position or the top of a building or something like that, it's a point and click system, fire and forget. Infrared. I'm guessing the ones they're sending here are the Mythic 1s and 2s. They have a newer model, the Mythic 3. It's based off the Chinese QW18. That one has active dual ranging IR and also has servos in the fins towards the end of the rocket motor so it can change direction.
Wow.
And has better tracking. But I don't know what their production capability is, if they have a lot of those in the field yet or not. So I'm guessing we're probably dealing with Mythic 1s and 2s.
How big are we talking about? Like, is that something somebody could put in a briefcase, trunk of a car? What are we talking about?
They're about 2 meters, so 6 to 7 feet long. You could put it in a duffel bag. I guess anything long enough, any kind of sporting bag that's long enough to carry equipment can probably carry one. The biggest problem is going to be planning and how competent the operators are.
So you said infrared tracking.
Yes.
How can you explain how that works?
Kind of like a heat-seeking missile.
Mhm.
It picks up the infrared source, and typically you kind of point it, and when you launch it, if you're already pointed at that source, it's going to go towards the heat of the aircraft or whatever you pointed at. So it's going to be tracking the engines, most likely.
Mhm.
All the exhaust coming out of the engines, the hot air, it'll pick up on that and try to go to the hottest point.
So you're not talking about like anybody that's got to do any kind of windage, elevation, or any of that. It's literally point and click.
Yeah.
Wow.
Point and click for the most part. As far as I know, I've never shot one.
Yeah.
I know I've been briefed on them on deployments before.
Yeah.
I've never actually handled one personally. I've been briefed on them because certain areas where we go into, we have to go into choke points and stuff, and we're worried about someone taking down one of our aircraft. And being on emergency reclamation team leader and program manager, I would be the person that would have to go in and help recover the aircraft and stuff too. So I would get briefed on stuff like that sometimes.
And I think when I was looking at this here, because I was doing a little research on it myself, the the speed on this thing is basically Mach 2, right?
Yeah, they're about Mach 2.6 for the Mythic 1, 2.8 for the Mythic 2. And the Mythic 3 came out recently, came out after I got out, so I haven't been briefed on it. But I believe it's based off the Chinese QW18, which is dual targeting infrared, and they have basically servos in the fins so they can track and change direction quickly.
Wow.
So,
you know, and Israel has, you know, in a lot of their commercial flights, Israel has these defense things, which I don't know how they work, but they somehow are able to handle these shoulder-fired rockets. We don't, our commercial flights, to my knowledge, don't have that.
no, what you have is there's different types of countermeasures. There's electronic countermeasures. There are IR countermeasures that actually pick up on the IR signature if it's being tracked, and they'll automatically disperse shaft and flare. So your military aircraft, not all of them have that either. I remember at HM14, we didn't upgrade to those until about 2008, and mainly, or 2007, my bad, just because we're doing the presidential escorts. That was the only reason we upgraded to them. So I'm sure there's a lot of commands, even the military side, that don't have that or fly an older aircraft.
So we know we've had a porous border here for at least 4 years. You know, even before that, there was problems, but it got really bad about 4 years ago. This kind of stuff is, you know, there's been rumors about, you know, sleeper cells sneaking into the country and things like that for a while, and of course, you know, some people don't want to hear that, and they will say, well, there's no proof of it or whatever. I can tell you that just based on the news story that came out this week about the RPG that came through, that's pretty indicative that there's bad people trying to bring in bad things, you know?
Well, here's some food for thought. The Border Patrol confiscates a metric ton of drugs every year,
Right.
but they confiscate less than 10% of what comes across the border.
Right.
That's what's concerning about these.
That's exactly what I was thinking is like, okay, so we caught some bad guys. That's awesome. Really, I'm really happy for that. Anytime that happens, how long were they doing this before they got caught? You know?
Yeah, and I've known about this since October, I think, is when some of the first reports came out, because I kind of try to keep up on this stuff.
Yeah.
And I heard about it in October. I don't remember who I heard about it from. And then about a month or two later, I heard Sarah Adams,
Yep.
the former CIA targeter. She tracks a lot of stuff open source and works with a lot of, I think she works with nonprofits and stuff. But she was on Sean Ryan's show, and they had her giving an update talking about that. And I actually get the updates that she writes in my email. She was talking about that. And then the third time I heard it was about a week or two ago on a week ago, when he had Shoemate on there. Was it Shoemate?
Shoemate, yep.
Former Army intelligence officer on there. So that's 3 different times I've heard it. 2 from credible sources, 1 kind of iffy. So
yeah, and Sarah Adams for sure seems legit, you know, and she even showed that she was contacted by the Pentagon asking her to please stop revealing intel, which really isn't intel. She's just trying to warn people of like there's legitimate threats in the United States right now that are just waiting for a signal, waiting for a command. Who knows?
Yeah, I believe that. With our border being as wide open as it is, and all the stuff going on pretty much everywhere in the world right now with Israel, Ukraine, and with the BRICS stuff going on, a lot of our enemies are kind of joining sides with each other. And I think, especially with what's going on in Afghanistan, with Al Qaeda being funded by the taxpayers, and having some of our military equipment, like 80 billion worth, I think.
Yeah, they got some nice toys now.
So we've basically taken a bunch of cavemen with AK-47s and given them enough military equipment, definitely to put them in one of the top tier militaries in the world as far as equipment.
Yeah.
And that's something that concerns me too, is all that military equipment that they have. And I watch a lot of travel shows because I've always been into traveling and going to different countries and learning about stuff, which part of the reason I went and worked on history and anthropology when I got out. I've been watching a lot of the people going into Syria for the first time after the regime fell.
Mhm.
And a lot of these people that have been traveling over the last year in Pakistan, in Iraq, and some of these other countries, I notice a lot of the U.S. military equipment is with a lot of these terrorist groups and these Muslim fighters. You'll pick and see like pieces of uniforms, pieces
Yep.
of gear, weapons, and I'm seeing a lot of that in Syria too. Which bothers me about this is maybe they have some of our systems too. Maybe they're bringing some Stinger systems in as well. You know, you just never know because we had so much of that stuff over there.
Yeah.
It could be Russian systems as well because Iran, China, Russia, Brazil, a lot of these countries are kind of joining forces.
The even before the withdrawal from Afghanistan, you know, I remember watching the news when ISIS was on their rampage and watching it with Mrs. Sarge, and you know that meme of Leonardo DiCaprio going pointing at the TV. So I was doing that, and I'm like, they're carrying M4s. Those are American weapons. And she's like, what? And I'm like, ISIS is armed with American weapons. We need to find out why, you know?
Yeah, I've been seeing that a lot, especially the last couple of years. Just about anywhere in the world, whether it's ISIS, Al Qaeda, some other Muslim group, I've been seeing bits and pieces of American weapons and gears on a lot of the fighters and stuff. And a lot of these you'll notice them on travel channels. People that don't even get political, that don't talk about war, they're just traveling, showing the different countries and the people. There's a lot of these travel channels that go into these places, and you just see stuff like that. You pick that up on the people that's around them, or someone's escorting them.
Right. The some of that might be, you know, stuff that battlefield pickups, things that got left on in certain scenes, things like that. Some of it, unfortunately, is probably black market stuff. Got kicked off the back of a truck. You know, there's big money in that. Those two things I get. I don't like it, but I get it. What worries me more is if it's being gifted. I don't like that.
Yeah, I don't like it when we just, and that's basically what happened. There's things in place. There's procedures in place to destroy all that equipment if we have to leave or we have to pull out of somewhere, and all of that just got abandoned. Those guys had less than 24 hours notice. Hey, just get your stuff and get out. I mean, they even left our working dogs there and left all of our contractors and people that are American citizens there. That they first said, "Oh no, we only left 17 people." Then they came out and said 300. The real number is probably like 3,000 or more because they never say the real number. You know?
Well, and all of the translators and informants and people who helped our guys over there, you know, they unfortunately they just got left behind. Most of them got left behind.
Well, they left all the equipment, the biometric scanning stuff with the memory devices still intact in the computer, so they can literally just pull it up and get the pictures and all the biometrics and the region they're from of all the people working with us. And they've just been going around finding those guys the last 4 years and
just killing them.
Just killing them.
Yeah, and their family.
And their family.
Yeah. It's super depressing when you start thinking about this, and people like Sarah Adams that are trying to, you know, make people aware and blow the whistle on this stuff. You know, I worry about them and their safety. You know, I don't want to see an Epstein happen. You know what I mean? So I hope that, you know, and to some extent hiding in the open light might be the best thing for them, right? You know, to be out there, be visible, be as vocal as you can, so that it gives you some protection. But accidents happen. Accidents can be arranged. You know.
And I think everybody should be doing that, not just the people that are highly visible like Sean Ryan and Sarah Adams. Everybody, we all, especially in 20 years of war, we all saw messed up stuff over there. Stuff we were told different that we were a part of that didn't feel right,
Yeah.
We didn't find out until coming home, looking back on it from, the 10,000-foot view, stuff like that. Everybody should be, don't be like the World War II veterans that didn't say anything when they came back and put us in the situation we are now with a lot of the corruption in our government, because they just didn't want to talk about it when they came back. I think that's what's different with my generation is we all saw some shady or sketchy stuff that the government or the military was doing while we were over there, and everyone's kind of had enough of it, especially after the Afghan pullout.
Well, and I'll add to that as a therapist who's worked with a lot of veterans who served in Iraq and Afghanistan. And I'm going to be careful here to protect people's confidentiality, but when things happen, okay, I got to speak a little bit cryptic here, but when things happen on the battlefield, right, terrible things happen, and things that the American viewer back home probably can't stomach, right? And then the soldier comes back to base and writes up their report about what happened, but then you have a commanding officer say you can't say that didn't happen, right? From you know what I'm talking about now?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So from a psychology standpoint, and hopefully everybody, that's about as I can't get too much clearer on that without starting into people's personal issues. But from a psychology standpoint, that is the equivalent of gaslighting, and it does a lot of damage to a person who's trying to make sense of what just happened, right? So you're exposed to a trauma, and one of the things that gets a trauma stuck, we call it, in therapy world, we would call it's like sticky or stuck, is when you have multiple different versions of the story in your head. And I've had people tell me that what they know in their heart is what happened. They were told that didn't happen. And so you've got multiple versions of the story going on in their head, and that's not good to do to somebody, let alone somebody who's just did something. You've commanded them to do something that's very, very hard and that nobody should ever have to see. It bothers me as a therapist. I hate that for all of you who served overseas and had to experience things like that.
Yeah, once you feel like you've been betrayed, it's kind of hard to get over that. I had a breaking point around 2015, 16, and I just couldn't get over it, and that was part of the reason I got out. And a good friend of mine, he took individual augmentee orders to work with the Army, and they sent him to Guantanamo, and he basically had to guard the prisoners and take them to and from interrogation rooms and basically stand there while they're getting interrogated.
Right.
So he knew all the information coming in and out and the stuff going on. But when he got out, he was kind of messed up in the head from that. And
Sure.
we know a couple other people as well, but he couldn't even get help because he'd go to talk to a therapist, and then he couldn't say anything. He had to go check with the command and through our security officer to the other command to see, can I got to go talk to a therapist. Can I talk about this? Can I talk about that? And they'd tell him, no, you can't even. So he couldn't even get help because he couldn't even talk about it, like you were saying.
Jeez. Well, I've never worked for the VA, so I don't know what their protocols are on that kind of stuff. That's probably maybe one of the advantages I have being outside of that system is that I don't have to follow VA rules. If a soldier wants to tell me something, it stays between me and that soldier.
Well, there's probably a lot more trust there too, because I don't trust the VA as far as I can throw them. The one time I tried to get some serious help for some serious issues, they basically just tried to do medical experiments on me.
I've heard a lot of stuff like that, and I hate that. I know a few people also that have had good results with good service with their VA. So I think it probably depends on the center,
Yeah.
And probably even depends on the individual that you're dealing with too.
And I've had mixed results with them so far, but it's another thing where you get both people. You get people that really do want to help, and then you get some sketchy people, some sketchy doctors and scientists, because it is a government program, and they will write funding for things that aren't what you would consider ethical in the civilian medical world. So you get a lot of that too.
Yeah, the I had a question here. I think this is about the missiles here. I'm assuming if it would work on a big plane, it would eat up any kind of vehicle that we would typically see, right?
Theoretically, I've never seen one launched at a vehicle or someone try to. I don't know because I never shot one myself, but yeah, theoretically, it could be modified or used on a vehicle.
These ManPads, are they much more powerful than the RPGs?
It's enough to damage a plane enough to bring it down. They can pack about 2 to 3 pounds of explosives in them, depending on the type and size. And it doesn't take a whole lot to bring an airplane down. It really doesn't.
Yeah.
If you hit one of the engines, you hit one of the vertical stabilators, you can bring it down.
And then, sorry, go ahead.
And also the avionics bays and the nose of the aircraft. If you hit those, even with small stuff, you can bring. Those are kind of the main danger areas are the vertical stabilators, the avionics bay, the intake and exhaust from the engine at those areas. The cabins can take a lot of damage as long as they don't lose too much fuel from the wings or the ladders above or below the cabin, depending on the aircraft. But those are the real, and it just takes a small explosion, a couple pounds of explosive, and you damage the engines enough to where it can't maintain flight, or you make it lose enough hydraulic fluid, just like your blood in your body and your heart pumps everything through.
Yeah.
They have a hydraulic system that all the flight controls, the landing gear, everything functions on. You lose enough fluid and you lose all control. Oh.
Yeah. And Scorpion was also asking a power plant. I mean, I would assume that it could do damage for sure. If you hit a critical point, who knows? Yeah.
Yeah.
And there was also in some, I might as well share some of these screens. There's IEDs that they've been discovering coming in through the southern border too. So let me see if I can share some of this stuff that I found. Yeah, this one. We'll do that. So, oh no, what happened to it? Did it bounce me out of it? Hang on, see if I can refresh it. There we go. So this was not too long ago. This was September. They were finding RPGs and IEDs. Now, what was interesting is I dug into this is it looks like there was some, and again, I don't know, what's true and what's not, but, and I love the author's name. This is from Tyler Durden. Hopefully everyone gets that. So, some of it is saying that it's coming from the United States into Mexico, right? So it's who knows. I mean, the border has been incredibly porous for 4 years, so yeah, stuff probably is going back and forth. Did you ever watch the show the Mayans? Have you seen that?
The Mayans?
Yeah,
motorcycle show.
Motorcycle Gang. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I haven't watched that yet. I've seen the original show, but I haven't seen the Mayans.
So it's set. I mean, it's fiction, of course, but I'm sure Kurt Sutter does his research pretty well, so I'm sure there's some truth in there. It's set on the southern border, from I think like really South Carolina. I mean, I'm Southern California, like below San Diego, like right on the edge of the border, I think is where it was. And it's about a 1% motorcycle gang that has connections with cartel across the border. And basically there's like all these tunnels that, forget about the border crossings. They can just get anything they want in and out of these tunnels. And you might find one and you collapse it. There's 12 other tunnels.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that was a problem for a long time. It probably still is. I remember some of the housing developments they were building on the border.
Mm-hmm.
I forget where it was. I think it was somewhere in Texas. And they had some cartel guys working with the laborers, and they dug tunnels under the foundations before they poured the foundations.
Yep.
So they had mules and people coming in one house, going under the tunnel, coming out. And this was going on for a few months, and the neighbors were like, "Why are there always people just walking out of this house and no one goes in?"
Yep.
So they called the police, and they discovered this whole tunnel system underneath these houses in this neighborhood.
Do we have any kind of tech that can detect that?
Oh, we do.
Yeah. Okay.
They just, I'm guessing, refuse to use it. The military has it. I can't go too into detail on it.
Understood. Yeah, and I also remember this goes back a long time ago, probably at least 20 years. I remember there was a story on the Canadian border where same exact thing as you were describing. Like basically on the Canadian side of the border, there was a house that had this basement with a way to go into the tunnel, and it came up on the United States side, and another house, and they were smuggling marijuana back and forth back in the day when marijuana was like criminalized for the most part.
That's wild. You can just walk across the woods in the Canadian border. Nobody's even watching.
Yeah. It was pretty interesting when that story came up, and that was at least 20 years ago. Yeah, I've heard that. I've got some friends that live pretty close to the border, and they said there's plenty of ways that you could cross if you wanted to.
Yeah, the Canadian border makes the Mexican border look like a joke, man. It's just open wilderness for the most part across.
Right. Until they put up their privacy hedge.
Yeah. We'll make them pay for it.
All right, let's check chat here a little bit, and then we'll start to wind this one down. So if you're just tuning in, folks, I do recommend you go back and watch from the beginning here. We're talking about these heavy weapons that some are confirmed for sure. Some that you can look up these stories. You just search border RPG, and you'll get several stories just from that. But specifically from the Sean Ryan show. They were talking about these Iranian ManPads, which sound much more sophisticated than your RPG. RPG's been around since what, like the 70s?
As long as I can remember.
Yeah. But they didn't, as far as I know, like the RPGs that I see in the movies and stuff like that, those don't have like infrared tracking and capabilities like that.
No, it's kind of a hope and a prayer when you fire one of those.
All right, well, thanks everybody in chat. I know you guys have been kind of been trying to look for questions. If you got them, I'd say throw them up now before we wind this down. I saw Burpee Yoga Uncle come in. Hudson Valley Prepping and Survival. Appreciate you guys. Coffee First. Cold War Prepper. Thank you, Lee. Appreciate you. I think I saw Steve come in. Virginia Bushcrafter. Scorpion Metals, of course. Robert Ham, thanks for joining. Appreciate you. New to this channel. Lazarus Long, thank you. Make sure you guys are also checking out Wayne's channel, Becoming Dangerous. I'm going to go ahead and drop it in chat again because somebody, Coffee, was saying that for some reason one of the links wasn't working. So let me drop that in chat right now.
Yeah, sometimes I got to drop a link to a video to get it to work. I don't know why. If it's just because I don't have enough subscribers that it pops up or something.
There was a weird change to the ruling about that. Like at one point they were going to take away the ability to drop links in live chats. And I think that enough people said, hey, that's, we use those a lot, that they rethought that. But maybe there's a subscriber limit, like you said. So you have how many right now prior to when we went live? So how many subscribers do you have right now?
I think I had 884 or 885.
Okay.
So I'm just restarting this channel. I'm doing this channel because my old one was pretty much dead. I can't get anything to circulate on that channel.
That's what happens. It's like once they put you into like a shadow ban, it takes a really long time to get out of it. I know Steve was dealing with that on his channel and it just like it's probably been like 3 years where they just kind of kept him at the same subscriber level, and just now he started to break out of it. Let's see. Bacon's good to see you. How you doing, brother? I think I got everybody. If you haven't said hi, or if I missed you, I apologize. All right, a couple people said they subscribed to you, so you should have a couple more tonight.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Of course. Thank you for coming on. So tell us again, what do you got coming up? You got any new videos that are in the pipe?
In the pipe, I'm working on getting out another video or two for new gun owners for defensive handguns. I just put one out for, if you don't know anything about it, how to go to a gun store, what guns to look for, how to buy one, how to do the research and everything. Because a lot of people are just asking me, how do I get familiar with guns? So I just realized there's a lot of people out there that didn't grow up the same way I did around it all the time. So I just kind of made a video. If you don't know nothing about guns, you can watch that video and it kind of gives you a starting point. Did another one about dry fire, just basic dry fire, how to manipulate your firearm and get used to it. Because that's one thing that is very, you see a lot of people just, even if they go shooting a few times a year, they just stand in a lane and shoot. They don't really learn how to manipulate and get comfortable with their firearm. See a lot of people in the store just handling it kind of like an infomercial. You know?
Yeah.
So, and
And
I've got another one coming out on dry fire, on practicing magazine changes and other stuff. And then I'm going to go through the series of emergency comms.
Cool. I love it. Yeah. So I didn't have any firearms, and actually had only ever handled firearms in Boy Scouts up until 2009. And in 2009, I had a farm in Kentucky at that time. And when you have a farm and you have livestock, you get predators. And so it became a necessity that I had to figure this out. So that was when I first started getting into firearms, and I knew nothing. Like, I couldn't have told you what the difference between a 22 LR and a 308 is.
Yeah.
That's how bad it was. And thankfully, I had a neighbor who was, showed me a lot of stuff, and was patient with me and didn't make fun of me while I was trying to figure this all out. Got a lot of books, did a lot of reading, watched a lot of videos. Actually, the Sportsman Channel, whatever, that's on TV, that does like guns and gear and those kind of shows.
Yeah, there's I can't remember the name of it. There's a few of the hunting channels and sportsman channels out there.
Yeah, I learned a lot just from watching that. Then I started to understand things like what the differences of calibers were, and which ones were for what purposes, and things like that. So I spent a lot of time just kind of watching that stuff. And then later on, I started getting involved with some trainings like Appleseed. Have you ever done that one?
Appleseed's a good one. I haven't done it personally, but I've always read and heard good things about it. I want to try it.
It was fun. I learned a lot there, and they'll throw in a little bit of American history with it too. Like, they'll teach you about like why marksmanship is important and tied into the shot heard around the world and that kind of stuff. And then I did IDPA for a little while, learning how to operate my pistol with moving targets and using cover and things like that. And that was with a lot of former military and former law enforcement, stuff like that. And they were really patient with me, and they'd be like, "Hey, you don't want to be standing that close to your cover. You need to be off by about 3 feet, and here's why." And would explain all that stuff to me. So I say on this channel, when I don't do a lot of firearms content, but if you're gonna buy a firearm, don't just like take it to the range one time. Get good training on it, because I think in the real world, you know better than me, a moving target that's shooting back at you is very different than a paper target at a range.
Oh yeah. Very different. I do firearms content not because I'm just a gun channel, because there's a lot of bad information out there, and I see a lot of bad stuff that'll get people killed, frankly. So I do kind of informative, instructional stuff for beginners, and then I'll do shorts when we're out at the range and I'm shooting with my buddies and we're just having fun. I'll make a few shorts and throw it up there with some music just for something a little entertaining to watch.
Yep. Yeah. And I've been doing a little bit more of that kind of stuff too, just throwing up shorts that are not necessarily like anything like must see content, just for fun stuff. And that's been kind of getting a little bit of traffic to the channel too. So I definitely recommend, for anybody that's got a channel, experiment with your shorts, experiment with your short videos a little bit, and try some different stuff. And you'd be surprised. Like, sometimes something just takes off.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and wrap this one up. Thank you, everybody who joined in on chat. And again, a couple things to make sure you check out Wayne's channel. I got the link in the description. I think that one works. I'm not sure if the problem was with this one here that's scrolling. And then if you haven't already, please go ahead and check out that Sean Ryan show with Sam Shoemate, and watch the whole thing. And then watch also the Sarah Adams one, which actually is probably even better. And we need to be prepared. You need to be taking your first aid classes. You need to be, if you're gonna carry a firearm, you need to be training. If you are not going to be doing either of those, then you need to at least learn how to be a darn good witness, right? And that's something you practice too, right? Like, so when you're out in public, you just game it, right? So if my wife and I do this when we're at the airport or we're out in public, we'll be like, okay, who's concealed carrying here, right? Like, little things like that. What was the person who just left the restaurant? What color shirt were they wearing, right? You train your brain to like pick up details. I talked about this a little bit last week too, right? So if you were going to describe me, say you saw me at a crime scene, what are you going to say? Well, I saw a bald white dude, about 5'11", 200 pounds. You just described half of the United States, right? What about my nose? My nose is a little bit crooked, right? Maybe if I had a t-shirt on, you could see a couple tattoos, things like that, right? If you're close enough to me, maybe you see I've got a couple scars, things like that. Same thing with license plates, like train your brain to like notice the license plate, break it into first 3, second 3, right? Because the brain just remembers that a little bit better. Anything you want to add to that before we call this one a night?
No, you covered it. Just pay attention to your surroundings and practice, like Sarge says.
Yep, absolutely. Well, thank you again. Appreciate you so much for helping me out tonight, and appreciate everything you've done for our country. And that goes for all the veterans out there that are watching. You guys are amazing, and we owe you a debt that can never be repaid. And last thoughts for tonight is for everybody that's in the Palisades area of California, that you're in our prayers, and all parts of the country deal with different kind of disasters for sure. We get hurricanes here, and we know what it's like to feel like you're alone and you're helpless and waiting to see if anybody's going to be there. Let's hope our government does the right thing and steps up. And let's hope these insurance companies do the right thing and step up. And you're in our prayers for sure. All right, everybody, keep planting your seeds, keep stacking your silver. This is Wayne, Becoming Dangerous, and Prepping with Sarge. Have a great weekend, everybody.